Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Ramona Yvette Stovall, daughter of Elise Owens. Everyone knows me by Yvette, and that's one thing about family. We never know everyone's proper government name until we get in person. If I could, if you got to forgive my back. We did, for a couple of years now, been doing the ancestry. And if you look up here, we'll start with Roberta. Most of us are here. Our aunt is here. We'll start with Roberta. Her parents are King Harper, and we may have some Harpers here, and Mary Massey. Interesting facts about King and Mary. King was married to someone else and has 7 children. Mary has 7 children but was never married. But let's take a look at our tree. And we can even go further back because Mary's father's name was George McCoy. And we have a lot of relations that are going back from there as well. But let's take a look at Mary, Roberta rather. As I said before, her parents are King, her mother's Mary, they have 7 children. Go back to, if we take a look at our census here. I know it's super hard to see. Here's a picture of the census. The census is where they go around, take account of how many people are in certain areas. Mary was here, she's 30 years old, and look at her children. Rachel, some of us older cousins have met these relatives. Rachel, Allie D, there's Grandma. She's 4 years old here, highlighted in that yellow. Lucille and Ethel. These are going back to, this is the 1910 census. So we're from Fayetteville. Close to her was, living not far away, was Collier. If we look at Collier, Collier is also from Fayetteville. It's not me, I take questions, so if you have questions, jump in. If somebody has something to add in, yes.
Who is Ethel? Because from my knowledge, Mary Massey had 7 kids, and Ethel wasn't one.
Mary Massey is
She had 7 kids, and Ethel wasn't one.
correct. So, and one thing with the census, not everything's exact. We're going by what we go on, and I couldn't tell you. But let's see. Let's go back to the tree real quick. Let's take a look since we got Mary. One of the things, the lessons that I got from my mom, Elise, she gave a little rundown real quick about the relationship between the Masseys and the Harpers. Roberta and Nellie, at one point, they're very close in age. They were, their dad, King, insisted that the family know each other. The family, and just imagine that. He's married to another woman with children, and here she is a woman that have outside children. But when they reached, they had like a family railroad, so if you reach a certain age and you wanted to get educated outside of Fayetteville, then they would go and stay with the Harpers. And it's interesting. Uncle Moses, everybody knows Uncle Moses. When they were growing up, he didn't pay attention to the family strife or family upset or any thing like that. He ignored that, and he was friends and went to school with both sides of the family. So, you know, he didn't participate in who's a Massey, who's a Harper. They were all family with him. And one thing that we were taught growing up, we would come south, my brother, sister, and I, my dad, James is over there, and he knew a lot of the older folks that are on here too, that Aunt Mildred would say, you better know who your family are because you don't know necessarily who you might marry. Fayetteville is a small place. Fayetteville was full of people that, through the history books, we would cross names. We would have, and I left it at the table, but the Parks family, the Kerchevals, and a few more I can't think of off the top of my head, that were all together. A lot of the family went to the high school, West End High School. So West End back then was segregated. I think the last class out of there was B's class. I think they were the last segregated, then they had to go to the integrated school. One thing, talking to my mom, I had asked her to do like a paragraph on each of the 13 children, and years before she passed away. And one of the things that she wanted to pass on to us was, I asked her, what did you want us to remember? She wanted us to remember the spirit of the family. A lot of us growing up, we heard stories of Collier. Collier was our grandfather, married to Roberta, and we did not, he of course passed away long before we were born. You know, the stats are here as to when he was born, somewhere around 1898. He was, Mom said, to people outside of the family, they knew him as, you know, a great, kind person, hard worker, and he was, and you can't take that away from him. The stories that we heard, that he was harsh to his sons and children, and he worked that farm. If we know that we came from a family of sharecroppers, so because of that, the boys really caught it pretty rough. The boys would have to stay home and wouldn't get their education, the girls as well too. And they would tell stories. When we would come home, we would sit at Mildred's house. It would be Aunt Mildred, Aunt Bet, and my mom. And they would get together and they would just talk most of the time. And they would talk about how hard it was. The crops were cotton. They would hated the burrs on their hands. There was the younger children who didn't have to do the work that they did, and they would laugh and talk about how at one point they had actually burned the barn, burned the cotton, and then they would be able to go back to school. So 6 months out of the year, like what was that show, the Beverly Hillbillies? People would watch that and they would laugh and say how Jethro Bodine only had a 4th grade education. It's true. If you're from the South and you work on a farm, most of the time you would have nothing more than a grammar school education because you had to work that farm. So what they wanted us to know, Aunt Mildred, Aunt Betty, my mom, wanted to make sure everyone knew was where you came from. We came from harsh background, however, it was from love. As much as they said how Collier was rough on the boys were so rough that they got up and joined the military. Some were drafted, one went to the Korean War, one went to other wars, but they said one thing that my mom wanted to know, that Collier was about family. As much as a Rolling Stone he was, but he also wanted, when dinner time came around, you were home, you ate. They often fed other people that were from the area as well. He could also play the piano. He could also, he was a carpenter. She said he could build anything out of everything. he could weave. If he built a chair, the chair was, if there was a fabric on it, he was the one who wove the fabric. So we come from people that have skills and knowledge. That was passed down through, I mean, some of us have, we know we have that in us. We have the musicians, we have the other side. Back up to Roberta's side, Mary Massey, she actually worked as a nurse at one time. She started with nothing. One thing too was important back then too, is that they could read. A lot of some of the family was functionally illiterate because you couldn't go to school, therefore you couldn't get your lessons and read. But going down the line, things my mom would point out, Stella Mae Owens, she said she was brilliant. She was educated. She actually went to college. When she got married, then the baby started happening, then she let go of that education and ended up taken care of. When she got sick, and mom referred to as got sick, we do have a family history of depression and mental health issues, but we pitch in. We do help take care of each other. The younger siblings would come up and help take care of the others. If there's anything on that screen you want me to back up to or look at, I could do that as well. My mom had a healthy memory of Ernest Lamb. She would call him the talker. He had a lot of great ideas. He had a lot of things going, had a business mind to him as well. Let's see. Go back to the trees. And then, let's see, Andy Owens. Andy Owens was Collier's dad. Mom would talk about when they were little, he was old to them. They would take him when they were little bitty girls, like 5 years old, take him out into the woods and leave him, and they thought that was funny. They'd get a whipping for it when they came back. But she remembers, like, you know, how we're sitting around and people don't talk to each other. She remembers him telling about what it was like to be a slave. Now, granted, he was born 1 year after slavery ended, but he still remembers those traditions still stayed. He told stories to them about when kids went to, when his parents worked the field, he and his siblings were left in a pen, like a pig pen, and they had to leave the kids. They would look up every now and then to make sure the kids were there, and this is in the hot sun. So infant mortality was huge back then. She told a story about this relative here, Rand Owens. Rand was a drinker. He would go to town, and one time he was at home sick. The house caught fire. Collier found out the house was on fire. They ran there, dragged him out. Not long after that is when Collier passed away. That had to do with that as well. But there's a lot of information. I won't hold you up too much longer. If there's anybody you guys want me to touch on real quick, I can. But and we can even talk later. But for the most part, we have a very rich history. One thing that we did do, we did a DNA story. My mom took the DNA because she just wanted to know. The makeup, let's see. She's not the only one that took it. Tab had Uncle Moses take one as well. And the information is this right here. That, oh, one thing I forgot to mention, Mary's birth census, there weren't birth certificates back then because the birth certificates weren't required to the 50. But when you look at her information on the census, they're listed as being mulatto. Grandma is also listed as being mulatto. It's a rude word for saying mixed race for the younger folks. But this is what runs up, and of course it's gonna be different for anyone, but for the siblings of my mom, this is pretty much what's gonna be. The primary Nigerian, Cameroon, Congo, Mali, it jumps to Sweden and Denmark. Then it comes back to Benin and Congo and Irish in the Ivory Coast. I know there's more. But basically we're made up of the Rainbow Coalition. We have some of everybody that's running in our veins. And if we know where we come from, then that takes away any of the arguments and racism and all this other stuff that we should come across. But thank you for your time. If there's anything you want to know, I'll be back there or out there or back at the hotel or anything like that. So it's up to you. Thank you so much.